no, I'm leaving.
So does everybody kind of know everybody, or there's probably some introductions?
What do we do now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Who are you?
I'm your worst nightmare, Rick. Your worst-
Introduce yourself.
I'm the host of this happy hour.
Well, we know who you are,
John,
but people
John
who-
DeChristopher. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Kenney Jones, but this is exciting to meet you.
Yes.
I appreciate this.
I've never had the pleasure of meeting myself either.
Well, it's pleased to meet me.
It's pleased to meet me soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, and we'll keep it fun. I just thought we could all, those of us who want to share a story or two can do that. And I know a few of us have some stories to tell, and
Why
just
don't you
talk
start,
about.
John?
Yeah, I'll wait for Andy to jump in, and then we'll sort of kick it off, I guess, but give it a couple more minutes. Yesterday he said, "Oh, Stan, yes."
I just have to say that the last time I saw Kenney Jones, I had hitchhiked to a gig in Tampa, and they free was opening for you guys at Tampa Stadium.
Oh, wow, that's a while back.
And man, it changed my life, dude. Between you and Simon Kirk, it just my little Florida head just went, oh my God, those are rock and roll bands. And your tailpipe has been like right there the whole. I mean, it's just
All I can do is apologize.
Oh, man, you guys had I think you had an onstage bartender, and it was like, and you were so good.
Hey, look.
Yeah.
There you go.
But I just
It's happy hour over here.
I just have to tell you that my heart, it was so worth it. I mean, I hitchhiked 4 hours, then I tried to go see, I hitchhiked around Florida to find more of it. And it was just extraordinary. And then of course I've seen you play since at the Forum in LA, and, but I've just loved what you brought to the table. That wonderful British dignified pride behind the kid.
You see.
Oh no, it's just not wasted on me, man. That's all.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Oh,
Same goes for me.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell a quick story. One of probably a few that I might that I may have to say today or tell today, but and I think I read somewhere, Kenney, that you spoke with Charlie on his birthday this year. I called him on his 80th birthday, and he was really, sort of upbeat, for Charlie, who's typically not very upbeat, but he was, I just remember the conversation I had. He said, I might see you later. We might be out later this year. I think at that time they were still sort of working out the details of what this tour is now. But yeah, it was as I look back at it, it was a sort of a bittersweet conversation. And he said he'd been getting a lot of phone calls. So I think I read somewhere, Kenney, that you spoke with him that day, presumably.
I was with Ronnie Wood, and we'd just been talking about it. So I called Charlie straight away, and I said, Charlie, I just have to congratulate you on reaching 80. And I said, we had such a great time. So we spoke for about half an hour on the phone, talking about all the good times we had and having a good old laugh. He didn't sound very well that day,
Yeah.
And he struggled through his conversation, but he was having a good laugh between being not well, basically.
Wow.
And I think he knew what was coming.
Huh?
I think he knew what was coming.
Yeah.
wow.
What?
Hey, John.
Yes,
I got
Steve.
a little tidbit along those lines. It's a really weird thing. For years and years, I've had Charlie's number in my cell phone, and just before COVID, I bought a car, and that car, downloads your numbers. And every time I get in the car over the last year and a half, and I press the button, I voice command, say, call home. And when it says call home, two numbers came up. The first one would be Charlie Watts, and the next one would be my house. Okay. And for all that last year and a half, I sat there and I said, oh man, I haven't talked with Charlie in so long. I should just press the button and call him. And I didn't do it, and now this happens. And every day I get in the car, and when I say call home, those two numbers still come up, but man, I can't call him now, you know?
Oh,
And
boy.
You
It's
can
one of
always
those-
call. You can always call Charlie. He'll be there.
Well, you know, it's one of those things I used to tell people, you know, if you want to reach out and make contact, do it. You know, I didn't call him. I said, oh, I don't want to bother him, you know, but, you know, you should just pick up the phone and say, hey, man, I was just wanted to say, hey, you know, that's it. And I should have, but I regret not having done that. But I can't take it out of my phone now. I got to leave it there. It's a reminder every time I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you'll probably be making a lot more calls than you did in the past to different people, huh?
Yeah, you know it, man. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Arnie Lang, my buddy over there, who does Gladstone replicas. I mean, he died at 90, just unexpectedly. Actually, in an interesting way. Arnie was a very sharp dressed man, and right to the end, he was 90 years old, and he fell, hit his head. But the interesting part of it, the fun part, he was going out at 90 years old, walking down to get a pedicure. All right.
Oh,
So how cool is
fantastic.
that? Going down to get a pedicure at 90 years old. He lived a good life.
I knew there was a reason I wasn't going to go get a pedicure.
90 years old, I'm going to go down and get a drink.
Yeah, bingo. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll just say, Kenny, on that call that I had with him that day, I said, you know, Charlie, I've been doing these. He said, is your band playing? You know, what are you doing? And I said, I've been doing these video chats with some drummers, and maybe there's something we could do. And he said, you know, I don't really do those things. And I said, well, I know. I said, I've had Steve Gadd, I've had, you know, Stan Lynch and Andy Newmark and a bunch of guys. And he said, well, you know, he said, let me think about it. You know, I don't have a computer, but maybe one of the girls could help me do it. And I think he might've been referring to his daughter or his granddaughter, or maybe even his wife. I don't know. But I had this idea that when they went on the road on one of his days off, he'd have nothing to do in his hotel one day, and you know, we'd make it happen. So, but you know, similar, I wish I had thought of it, you know, sooner to try to make something happen, because there's so many things I think that people would like to know about Charlie that you'd never really know unless you really sort of talk to him about it. Do you know what I mean? He's a man of few words when it came to his playing, his drums, his history, you know. So
Didn't have to say much.
Charlie wasn't a nutty drummer. He was a good guy and a very quiet, lovely family man. And he loved horses. He loved drums. He loved jazz. He loved being alive and just being part of the furniture in a band. But I think every time we got together, we had a lovely time. We just talked about, I mean, there's no Keith Moon. He wouldn't, you know, we got no great stories about throwing stuff out, drums out of windows or stuff. No, what we did do, every time we got together, I knew Charlie when he was drinking lots of wine and, I don't know, just alcohol. But we had a good laugh and we had a sensible conversation. We never ever sort of had a heavy one throwing things at each other. I don't know. Once I was in Lowe's Midtown in New York with John Bonham, and we went down the English pub there. And they sold Watney's Red Barrel pints of beer. And we had a competition. I said, I can't drink any more of this stuff, John. So, and he kept drinking it, and I kept drinking the brandy. I fell over. I couldn't keep up with him. It's nuts. That's one story. But none of that with Charlie. Charlie was totally laid back, sitting there, enjoying his drink, very quiet. And we just enjoyed the peace and quiet for a change of being with each other. We never really talked about drums. We just talked about each other and what we were doing, and just enjoying each other's company. That was the lovely thing about Charlie. Charlie was a lovely, easy-spoken, nice, relaxed guy to be with. And that reflects in his drumming.
yeah. Yep.
Well said.
Well said, Kenny. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Steve Gadd, do you want to maybe we'll sort of go around? I don't know if we're all looking at this the same way, but you're in my top left corner. You're the secret square. So
You're on my left.
I'm Steve. I'm an alcoholic and drug addict.
So am I.
Hey, Kenny, did you and Charlie used to talk about horses? And were you, did you ride together?
No, we never rode together. And Charlie, I don't think rode as well. But what we did do, I know his wife, Shirley, she has about 70 horses, and they bred horses and their daughter as well. So we had a lot in common because I used to ride, well, I don't ride anymore. I'm fighting to fall off and break an arm.
Right. I remember when I saw you at the Ginger thing.
Yeah.
That you told me they had polo ponies and
Yeah.
it was I used to have my grandparents and my uncle had horses when I was a kid.
I remember you telling me, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I met Charlie with John to Christopher and Yard. We all went to see him. He was playing at a little club in Paris with it was with two keyboard players and it was like a boogie woogie kind of thing he was doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it was great. And the thing that the thing that stuck out to me, other than, I mean, the band sounded great, and he was having a ball. But I mean, the bass player that was in the band was somebody that he grew up with. Charlie grew up with this guy. And I remember, you know, hearing that story about how long they've been playing together. And, you know, so, and I knew from hearing about Charlie that he was a family guy. He loved his wife and his kids and his grandkids and
that's Charlie all over.
Huh?
That's Charlie. That's Charlie.
Yeah. That's and you know what else killed me about him? He was elegant, man. The guy, and I loved the way he dressed and the way he kept himself. And,
magnificently.
And you know what? I love the Stones. I love the band. I never went to a Stones concert. And it's not like I listened to all their albums, but whenever I heard the band, I loved it. It had a rawness about it. And when I think about how Charlie was in terms of, you know, being soft-spoken, but also being true to himself in terms of, he was a bebopper. He loved jazz. He played the little kit. And I think that, you know, in terms of being important in that band, that was a really important position. He was integral in that band just by his the way he could hold things down, keep it down to earth, and not sort of go off on a tangent. I think that was a big part of it. You know, I'm only surmising, but you know, he's a great guy. I have a lot of respect for him, and
Charlie, funny enough, Charlie used to say to me that the reason is he got labelled for being so laid back, you know, behind the beat and all that, was they kept him up till 4 a.m. So he got really tired to get behind the beat. I can believe that. I've been there in that position myself.
Right.
That's funny.
But
Well, Yard,
it was great to know him anyway. It was.
Oh yeah, it's been a pleasure to be on this earth with him until his death.
yeah, absolutely.
But like I said earlier, before, I've been saying a lot about in the press and stuff. You know, Charlie Watts is alive. His spirit will always be with us. Every time you listen to his playing, listen to him on a Stones record, you'll just think, lovely Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He had that ability to play the right thing at the right time, and
Well, there you go. You see, I mean, I don't want to get morbid about it, but you know, see, I like to keep the spirit of Charlie alive. You know, because that's what it's all about. You work all your life and do all that. And Charlie said, you know, what's it like being in the Stones? He said, yeah, great. He said, but it's 25 years on the road and 25 years hanging about.
yeah, yeah.
Great line.
Exactly.
You work with Charlie Yard?
Yeah, I got called in by Kenny's old pal, Bill Harrison.
Oh, Bill, yeah.
Yeah, and when when Bill was going out with Ray Cooper and Elton, if he was busy, he'd call me and say, would you look after Charlie with ABC and D a Boogie Woogie? And it was an honor to do it. And when we met, it was great. You know, it was there he is.
Yeah.
Up a bit, Kenny.
Keep him alive, keep him alive.
And so I'd go in because it was just great because we're both sarcastic and he's so laid back and chilled. I couldn't believe it. And I remember meeting him at the airport at Heathrow to fly out to Austria. And I took his cymbals off him and off we went. And then when we got to the coffee bar, he said, watch the bags. He said, no, go and get the coffees. And off he went. And he did it again in Austria. He went off and he said, watch the bags. I'll be back in a minute. Came back, laid the coffees down, and he bought me some strudel as well. So I would have it every day in the hotel before we left for the gig. And it was just so touching. And it's just his sarcasm, because when we got invited to dinner with the mayor of this town, who's the music promoter, and he said, tomorrow, he said, before you leave, I'll take you up in the mountains and we'll have a traditional Austrian meal. And I started to panic. And
You got to leave this in, John. This is
John. Yeah.
We're gonna spend an hour watching Andy in the background trying to figure out how to turn his computer on.
Oh man.
You don't need to edit this, John. Just broadcast it live.
You know, when he gets it set up, you should just say, and thanks for joining us. And we'll hang up.
Yeah.
And we're out.
First he's late. First he's late.
For joining us, and goodbye until next year. I don't nudge one another of us.
Oh man.
Oh,
Andy,
man,
we're all muted. He can't hear us right now. No,
Yeah.
I guess not. Okay. I've never
He
had
should
a-
have.
Does anybody know sign language? Andy.
Andy. Hit the mute button. Here we go. Okay. Can you hear us now, Andy? Yes. No? You can't hear us?
Oh fuck.
All right. Andy, say something. Andy, can you?
Oh, send him a chat. No, he won't know how to turn that on anyway.
I did. I
want you.
Oh,
He booted himself.
is it something I
because
said?
Andy Newmark left. He left the building.
Oh God.
Oh,
He should have asked his grandkids how to do this.
Yeah.
I do.
He only has cats.
that's right. He only has cats.
Where is he?
Oh,
Oh man. Oh,
booked
well,
a flight to Boston to go to John's house so that he could talk to us from there.
Yeah, right.
look, here he is.
Andy, where is he now?
How many drummers does it take to do a Zoom call?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Apparently 10. 9 anyway. Well, I was gonna Steve Maxwell, I know you have probably a lot of stories from working with Charlie and you archived his collection
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Oh man, 2007.
Wow.
Charlie is the neatest guy on the face of the earth, right? Except when you went over to where all the drums were when I flew over there, it was nothing but a massive pile of cardboard boxes. There were about 300 cardboard boxes, no rhyme or reason to anything. It was
Really?
wild and crazy. I spent 2 weeks over there cataloging everything. And I told a couple of little stories like this in my tribute to him, but there are two cool ones. And then there's a little bit about his kindness and everything that I really do want to touch on, because that's more important to me actually than even the great drumming contributions he made.
But go ahead, Steve. Yeah, continue.
No,
Yeah, keep going.
So one of the things, went over there and he said, I was looking at his drums and he said, I said, Charlie, whatever happened to the first kit that you had, the Ludwig Sky Blue Pearl kit that you had before you had the Gretsch kits? He says, I gave that to somebody and it's gone and somebody did something with it. I don't know. So I was crawling around the floor over there and I see a bunch of boxes, and scribbled on the box says, my first drum set. And I pull it out, open it. It's the Sky Blue Pearl Ludwig kit. So I picked up the phone, I called him and I said, Charlie, it's here. Come over. So we got somebody to bring him over, and he goes, oh my God. And he said, me dad bought that for me on hire credit. So it's kind of like, and so it's like, that's so cool. And I put it in a special place over there. Said, everybody take care of it. But then one other time I was doing it, and he called me and he said, did you find, you need to find a little box. And I said, well, what is it? He said, no, did you find this box? And I don't understand what he's talking about. He said, it's about the size of like a suitcase. I said, well, no, because your personal stuff is over in one place and this is your drums. And, I'm not touching your personal stuff. So we got to find it. We got to find it. I said, what's the big deal? So we're over there and we look around, we find this box, this little box about the size of a suitcase. We open it up. He says, this is it. So I open the box and it's a bunch of these things like you'd buy it maybe in the 30s or the 40s. It's a little thing of percussion, goofy stuff, a little set of little, finger cymbals, a little goofy, bunch of little weird stuff. He said, I used this with Keith when we recorded the demo on cassette for Street Fighting Man.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, now I get it. I mean, it's like, why am I running around looking for a suitcase? We're trying to catalog the drums, but that was so important to him. He wanted that, so we put it in a special place with a little sign on it. But the things for me, one other thing, he bought a bunch of stuff from me, and he was on tour, and he said, well, you don't have to worry about when you ship it because I won't see it for a year or so. I said, well, that's kind of crazy. So before I went to the show, I made a nice album of photographs of all of those things, so at least he could take it with him and say, hey, here's what I just got. So I bring it to the show. I show him the album and he looks through it. I said, these are all the things that you just got. He said, oh, that's very nice. And he hands me back the album. And I said, no, man, it's for you, so you got something to look at. So, and the other two things, it's just the most important things to me, his generosity, the stuff he did for Joe Morello, it was incredible. Joe and his wife, Jean, were not in good circumstances at all financially. And I had gotten to the point where I worked on Joe getting his kit back from Brubeck. And
Frozen.
Brubeck heard this and he stopped. He cut him off.
Are you frozen? Huh?
Uh-oh. Steve, you're
at
here.
What and was like changing money for.
I think Charlie is probably fucking this up, He's
I think you're right, Michael. Yeah, he is. He's having the last laugh.
Enough.
Did you do any preparation for this at all?
Of course I didn't. Oh, Steve's back. Steve Maxwell is back. Okay. Steve, we lost you for a minute.
Lost you around Joe.
Joe Morello.
Oh,
Joe Morello and his wife. Yeah.
Yeah, Charlie bought the Brubeck era kit. He bought the Peisty cymbals from that same era.
Wow.
Joe's chrome over brass snare that he used with Marion McPartland. He just wanted those things to contribute, and it was life-changing money for Joe and Jean. And that's a side of the rock star image that a lot of people don't see. Charlie was such a kind, wonderful guy. He's unbelievable, unassuming, just like all of us have just said. It was rare qualities, and I'll miss him a lot, man. He was a great guy.
Yeah. And I'll just, talking about Joe Morello, this has become public, I know, in the last since Charlie's passing, and I think he didn't want people to know that his drumstick that Vic Firth makes was a copy of the Joe Morello 11A Ludwig stick. So his royalties were sent to Joe all those years for that drumstick. And my wife, who's Vic Firth's daughter, told me this many years ago, and she said, it's probably not something that Charlie wants people to know about, but it's.
And that's I think that where I cut out, that was what I was talking about as well, because he, that was amazing. The guy was just amazingly kind and generous, and just a wonderful person.
Yeah.
That's why everyone loved him.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
He was so unassuming, down to earth, that he made everyone feel comfortable around him.
Absolutely.
And it was one of my greatest moments was to get to work with him.
Yeah.
Because of how he was. Because there's loads of drummers I really admire and grown up with, and but it's their humility and kindness to people.
Yeah,
I like. You kind of lock in with them and think, yeah, not only a great drummer but a great guy too.
Yeah.
And it's not just being a super beautiful human being, who's famous. It wouldn't matter if he was famous or a man of wealth and taste like he is. As a general human being, he was more excellent than most of us.
Yeah.
In his kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely so. But my touching moments are really simple. It's like you're in a hotel and you're waiting to check out, and Charlie carries his own bags down the stairs. No fuss, immaculately dressed in his three-piece suit, tie on, everything. And when we stopped at service stations, he would just get out and go and buy something from the shop. And his great friend, Dave Green, who played bass in the band, they've been friends for 75 years, lived next door to each other from the age of 5, became friends, and both have had successful careers in music. And Dave and Charlie are two peas in a pod, same temperament, just real nice people. And you can see why they were friends all those years.
I got a couple of things, but one of them is I was in the studio once when the Stones were recording, hanging out, and sitting on the couch, but they're doing the track, and I noticed Charlie, every time he hits the snare drum, like all this stuff would fly up. I'm thinking, what is that? They got done, and he came and sat on the couch next to me. I said, Charlie, what's that stuff flying up off the snare drum? He said, oh, that's the snare drum I used at the Hyde Park concert for Brian, and that's confetti that was flying around. And that was like 30 years ago, It was still on the drum.
That's classic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I got one more that's really kind of sweet.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows about Charlie's love for jazz, and he had been invited by Jack DeJohnette to come down and see Keith Jarrett and Jack, and I think at the Vanguard or somewhere downtown, I forget, but he wasn't in town, so he called Mick and he said, Mick, call Michael Shrieve and go down to the club so you can tell Jack that I said hello and that I want somebody to represent. So Mick came over to the house. We went down and we watched the show because Jack had asked Mick to do it. And Mick had a great time too.
That's great. That's great. Speaking of his love for all the jazz legends in 2012, I remember the year because it was at the end of my time at Zildjian. They were having their premiere of not Shine a Light, but the movie they did after Crossfire Hurricane. They were doing the premiere in New York City. Steve, Maxwell, I don't know if you were around for that or not, but
I was there, and I was yes, I
Yeah.
remember that. Yes,
I came to. Actually came right from London, Andy. I'd had dinner with you and a bunch of people while I was there. While Kelly and I were there, and then we went to New York for the premiere. But he asked me if I could wait out front for Roy Haynes to make sure that Roy got in okay. Because he said I've got to go now, but can you, like, it was very important that Roy get brought inside and get comfortable. So I brought Roy in. I sat him down in a nice spot up on the second floor, like the sort of mezzanine area, and I got a text or a call from Anton Fig, who was downstairs, and I guess I must have had his pass. So I ran down and got Anton, and as we came up, Charlie was there talking to Roy, and he was so happy and like relieved that Roy was there and comfortable. You know, it was beautiful. I mean, he was always doing stuff like that. I know he used to send a limo for Roy to
Yeah, yeah.
Roy lived in Long Island. Yeah, to come.
Oh, John, I've got a real quick Roy story. Remember when ABC and D of Boogie Woogie did that week at the Iridium?
Yeah.
2012, I think it was. And I was with Charlie that whole week. I let him use my drums and everything. And then one night Roy came, and I said to Charlie, I said, you know, Roy's here. He said, bloody hell, I'm gonna have to play better tonight.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but he was thrilled to have Roy there. It really meant a lot to him. It was.
Yeah,
But
I spoke to Graham Haynes a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned Roy's son, and he said that every time
Yeah.
the Stones played or Charlie played, he would send a limo and make sure that Charlie was that Roy was well taken care of. They must have had great discussions about clothing too, huh?
Probably, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll bet. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you in 2004, Andy and Peter Erskine and Steve White and Mark Mondesir and myself and the two folks that worked at Zildjian in the UK, Tina and Bob, went to see Charlie at Ronnie Scott's, and he was nervous that Peter Erskine was in the audience. You know, he said to me something like, you know, why do you have to bring these people to see me or something? You know, like, it's fine if you come by yourself. And then 6 years later, Steve and I, as he was saying in the story, we were in Paris in Yard on the Mission from Gadd tour, and we went to see him with the ABCD of Boogie Woogie at a club in Paris. And he said, I remember that night, he said something like, you know, you know, he was definitely like, why do you have to bring these people to see me? Like, but he was so humble like that. And that picture that I showed of Yard and Steve and me and everybody and Charlie, my wife took that picture, and I remember him saying this. He turned to you, Steve, and he said, he's always doing promos, this guy. It's always got to be about, I mean, you know, it was his way of busting my balls, which was hilarious. Like, I said, let's get a picture. Let's get a picture. And he's like, oh, really, a picture? You know,
You know, John, when we talk about his ability to and his love of jazz, there was something that I think is kind of meaningful. At one point, I had talked to him. I said, Charlie, why don't we do a book about the jazz drummers that you love, because you bought stuff from me that was from all these different players. And so one time I was over there, and I still have the tapes of this. We never finished it, but we actually sat in his flat in South Kensington there and talked for 3 hours. And I've got it all on tape. And one of these days I'd love to, I don't want any money for it, but I'd love to make it into something as a history, because he talked. If you walked in there, first of all, you could see pictures on the wall all over the place of Charlie Parker, you know, Ellington, Basie, you name it, all of the people that he loved. And we sat in his kitchen there and sipped espresso. What was charming about it was out of little chipped espresso cups. It didn't matter. Just we sat there, and for 3 hours, he talked about every one of these people and what they meant to him. Joe Morello, Buddy, Davy Tuff, Big Sid Catlett, Louis Bellson, all of these people, and then the other musicians in and around that area. It wasn't just that he was like an encyclopedia of jazz musicians, period, not just jazz drummers. And it was just wonderful to sit there and have that. And like I say, I've still got the tapes, and that's something I think somewhere along the line should be made available. I'd love to do that.
Boy.
absolutely.
Now, why don't you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
get it transcribed and edited,
Yeah.
and John will put it out.
Well, I just don't want to do anything like that without Shirley or somebody saying it's okay to do it. I just want it to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want people to get a chance to hear that.
yeah.
But I've got it now, and I'll try to work on that, because that I think would be important.
Great.
He
Yeah.
was such
yeah.
knowledge. I mean, he just knew so much. He'd talk about Bill Evans, he'd talk about Ellington, he'd talk about Basie, he'd talk about Charlie Parker, and then other drummers. Stan Levy, who was a great drummer in that same era, Dizzy. Just, it went on and on and on. It was incredible. It's jazz education for me.
Yeah.
I know.
That's a great pick there. What year is that, John? That picture with Stan and Charlie?
Is that 89, Stan, or 90?
88, 89, yeah.
Must be. I mean,
Steel Wheels, maybe?
Steel Wheels?
Oh, yeah. Steel Wheels. I see that. Yeah.
LA
So-
Coliseum, LA Coliseum, or
yes. Yeah.
that was the first time I saw them. And then fast forward to 2019 in Phoenix, we flew out there because it was a smaller market. We got to see Charlie. That was the last time we saw them play. But that I remember this event. They had 2 openers. It was Living Color, and then Guns N' Roses, and Axl Rose sort of fell off the front of the stage. He was acting up. But then the opening song was Start Me Up, and they came out, and it had this explosion as soon as Charlie hit that first backbeat, and it was just electrifying from there on out. So incredible chance to hang out with him after that several times, kind of all over the world. 3 real memorable ones were Nampa, Idaho, small market place. So I brought my daughter, who was in the 5th grade, because she wanted to, see them there. And it was a 12,000 seat hall. It was really fun. She got to meet them. They used to do that little thing where they rehearse the insert songs or the voted songs in the rehearsal room. So each one of them came over and got to meet her and take a picture with her. So, Charlie, once again, is so accommodating on any situation. And then same thing at Hyde Park. They were played the, most recent one. And on that exhibitionism tour, the exhibit there, so that blue, Steve Maxwell was talking about the blue Ludwig kit that was at that exhibition. You got to see it right close. That was really cool. And, just shout out to Don McCauley and Pierre de Beauport. Those are my buddies that, have kept me in the loop with the whole Charlie Watts thing. And, it's lifelong impact for me to have had the chance to hang out with him several times.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Seeing him I saw him in Buffalo and some other smaller markets, and those were always the best shows because, there was more access, I guess you could say, if nothing else. Like he was, there were fewer sort of layers of people to get through to just spend time with him. And very memorable visits. And
We've all got
Stan.
great things to say about Charlie. Oh, it's lovely listening to everybody and their wonderful stories.
Thanks, Kenny.
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to leave you now, guys. Before
All
I
right,
go, can I make a toast to Charlie?
Yes, great
Cheers.
idea.
To Charlie.
Charlie.
Cheers to
Cheers.
Charlie. Yeah.
Cheers.
And to you guys, and well done, everyone. You've got lovely
you, Kenny.
things to say about him.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you for joining us. We
Still soon.
really appreciate it.
Keep up the good
Yep,
work.
and we'll see you soon.
I'm sorry to leave you.
No, it's all right. Thank you for joining.
Where's Steve Maxwell gone?
I'm here.
Oh, Steve's still there.
Steve.
Yep.
I'm still here.
Remember when you came over to log Charlie's stuff, and I came down to the warehouse,
Yes.
and because every time we went out, I used to pick his cymbals up, and his Keith Moon stick bag,
Yep.
and his pedals. We take 2 Speed Kings with us,
Mhm.
and I remember being in the warehouse with him, and he's looking up at the shelves, and he said to me, I could do with some plain drum bags for everything. So I called a friend of mine who's a well-known, renowned drum bag maker, who's a huge Stones fan. And I said, I've got a great little gig for you. And I told him, I said, we want the bags, but we don't want the logo. We just want a plain black bag. And he said, I can't. I'm thinking, who's going to know?
Who's gonna know? Nobody's gonna know, right?
They're going to be in the warehouse,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
just do it,
Yeah.
And it's things people call me, and I think, why not? Let's do it, But he said, I can't let it go out. And I just thought, you're a
Come
man.
on. You gotta be
Charlie
crazy.
Watts fan.
And
Who
plus, it's in the
cares?
warehouse. Only like 6 people can get in there. It's like that's it.
He wouldn't do it, and I just thought,
Like Fort Knox.
it's lucky it's
Yeah,
not me.
exactly. Oh, that's
Those
great.
bags will be up there Monday morning. But no, the good thing about that was I was in the warehouse and then I was talking to Charlie when we're out, and we're talking about his collection. And he said a great thing. He said they shouldn't be in bags on the shelves. They should be played.
Yeah.
And that was
Right.
a great comment.
Mm.
Yeah.
He and I had talked once, Yard, about actually doing a museum where those would all be on display,
Yeah.
interactive with, oh, this was Buddy's kit, and here's somebody, Louis Belson. He's got
Yeah.
Kenny Clark's premier kit that I sent him, Sonny
Yeah.
Greer's leading kit from Ellington, all of these things that I
Wow.
sent that he got from me. The,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
collection is unbelievable. He's got Tony Williams' Istanbul K's that I got him. He's got Joe Morello's Brubeck era kit.
Yeah.
He's got one of Belson's kits. These are all things that he got from me, and they're like a history of jazz drummers. It's incredible. The only 5x14 Billy Gladstone snare drum in existence. He's got the white marine pearl Billy Gladstone kit that was made for Benny Goodman with Cozy Cole's snare drum that was owned by different people, Bunny Carlos, then Carl Palmer, and I brokered it from Carl to Charlie. I mean, this stuff is, it's the history of jazz drumming. It's unbelievable. Big Sid Catlett cymbals.
Wow.
He
What's
got
the,
those.
Steve, what's the Pisces symbol from Brubeck that Joe Morello had?
He had,
602.
they were hi-hats, crashes, and his ride. It was a full set of Pisces.
What's the ride? What is it?
It was a 20, 602.
602.
They were all
But-
602s. Yeah.
Supposedly he used an A Zildjian on take 5. I've heard that it was not a 602. That I always assumed it was, but I think I'd heard it was before he went to Paiste. He
It-
was playing A
Yeah.
Zildjian.
And I have
And I have-
the 14-inch hats that he used on take 5, and those were A's. Those were A's as well.
Yeah, I always assumed they were 602s, but I think it was just ahead. He made that recording just ahead of that time. But just a quick
Yeah.
funny. So Charlie visited Zildjian one time only in 2006, and I think Steve, it was probably around the time you're talking when he was accumulating all these kits. Talking
Yes,
about,
yep.
he told me he was gonna do a coffee table book.
Yeah.
Photograph all the kits, and we had a bunch of pictures on our wall that he was so excited. In fact, his main reason for coming that day was to look at all the pictures. I'd been telling him for years, you won't believe, the pictures that we have going back to the 30s. And so we walked along and he asked for copies of certain ones because in some of these pictures were the drum kits that he got from you.
That's
So
right. And the
yeah.
concept for the book was going to be it's a coffee table book. On this page, on the left page, here's a beautiful picture of the set. On the right page, it's split in two. Here's Charlie's recollection of why it was important to him to have a Joe Morello's drum set. And the bottom half of it was going to be how the set came to me and eventually got to Charlie. I mean, he's also got Mel Lewis's 12, 14, 20 Burgundy Sparkle kit. At one point, and what you said, Yard, about those things should be played. At one point, I was there and Charlie came over and I said, Charlie, come on. And I set up 2 drum sets. I set up Mel Lewis's kit and I set up one other kit. And I said, here, play it. Because he'd never had a chance to play any of these. I said, here, sit down and play, have fun. And it was remarkable. But yes, yeah, those things, I'd love to see those things displayed somewhere. I don't know I don't know. I mean, it was so important to him to collect these pieces of the drummers that meant so much to him, his idols, the people that inspired him. So I hope something gets done with that to kind of memorialize that forever. That would be great.
Yeah. I want to tell one quick, what I think is kind of a funny story. The last time I saw him 2 years ago, 2019 on tour, I had just bought this Rogers kit. It's in the other room. It's not in view here, but it's a mid 60s holiday kit, 13, 16, 22. In fact, I was inspired by the kit that you sold Peter Erskine, Steve Maxwell, to
Yes.
to get a Rogers. And Peter was telling me,
yeah.
you got to get these drums are amazing. So I found one from a guy locally, beautiful black diamond pearl kit that Rick Marotta's rolling his eyes about right now because I made Rick look at it. But so I'm excited. I just got the kit a month or two before that. I think I'd sent pictures to you, Stan, when I got these drums. And so I'm telling Charlie about them. And I said, do you have any Rogers drums in your collection? All excited. He said, well, yes, actually, I have Louis Belson's kit that he used for Skin Deep. So, and I went, of course you do. I'm thinking like, I have some drums that Charlie doesn't have. He goes, well, I've got Louis's kit that he used on Skin Deep.
Yeah, you got a kit of Louis from me, and you got a kit of Buddies from me. Buddies Rogers kit they use with Harry James.
Yeah, you got to do a show like a PAS or somebody to like put all these kits out and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear from these three quiet men here, Stan and Rick and Andy, that maybe they're so. Andy, can I just tell a quick funny story about when we saw him, you and me and Peter and the gang in 2004, right? I think about 6 months later, you did a gig with Ronnie, or sometime not long after that, you did a gig with Ronnie Wood.
Mhm.
And I happened to talk to Charlie on the phone, and he said, I saw your friend playing with Ronnie, and he didn't remember your name right away, but he referred to you as that really good American drummer. And he said, he came you brought him with you to see me or something. And I said, oh, Andy Newmark. He said, Andy, that's it, Andy. So anyway, you were the really good American drummer.
Well, that's nice. I'll take a compliment wherever I can get it.
Me too. Yeah, he never called me that. I know that.
An American now living in England. An American in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to an American in Paris.
Yeah. Or an Englishman in New York.
Yeah. Good.
Well, I didn't know Charlie, but I do love the Rolling Stones music, and I always have. I always thought, I mean, I never had the records. I never had anybody's records. I never collected records in my life, but I knew all their tunes, and I always thought they were a soulful bunch of cats. And man, I mean, how do you say that thing? They were much greater than the sum of their individual parts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
You know what's really fascinating about Charlie, or interesting at least, is the power of that band, and we all know, is unbelievable. If you go to a concert, one of the songs itself, I just looked at the set list from Pittsburgh from the other night, right? And it's unbelievable, the catalog of songs, of course, but it's so powerful. And when you look at Charlie play, he's not bashing the drums whatsoever. Whereas you think the heavy rock drummers, they're like, and Charlie's just playing there, but it sounds huge.
Well, yeah, that's a lesson it took me a while to learn. Let the microphones do the work.
Yeah.
Because if you try to play too hard, so much important shit goes out the window once you start trying to play with too much volume. But just on that point, I saw Led Zeppelin before John Bonham died in Germany. And I was on the side of the stage, and they're considered like the godfathers of metal, heavy metal. And I stood on the side of the stage and couldn't believe how quietly they were all playing. It was loud as shit coming out of the house PA. It was overwhelming. But on the side of the stage where I was, John Bonham was not even breaking a sweat. I mean, he was playing at a very, very relaxed volume. And that's what I remember from the concert, that these guys, though they are known for the heavy metal vibe, it's like when you hear them up close, they're just four guys who really acknowledge the space and the dynamics. And it's the house PA that is making that shit be enormous.
Yeah.
But yeah, Charlie played very gentle.
Yeah.
Very gentle.
Yeah.
When I saw him with Peter and John that night at Ronnie Scott's, it was incredibly unsensational, like in a way that Charlie is so unsensational. in the eyes of some, but so beautiful in the eyes of others. And, you know, like, I mean, even in the Rolling Stones, I mean, Charlie plays the odd little fill, maybe every 16 bars. But in this thing with his big band, my recollection is that Charlie never played a single fill through the entire set.
Wow.
And that was pretty amazing in modesty.
Mm-hmm.
And also, well, it was typical of Charlie. He played less with the big band than he does with the Rolling Stones. I really mean this. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
exaggerating. He didn't play a single fill. His right hand never came off the ride cymbal.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the modesty of it all
Mhm.
was actually overwhelming. And Peter Erskine looked at me afterwards and said, and now you got to remember, Peter Erskine is like true at his core. He's a jazz motherfucker. Okay. Right. He can play anything. He's an all-rounder, but at his core, he's a jazz cat, old school. He's played in big bands, all that stuff. You know, Peter has that shit covered. So you got to understand, Peter is looking at this as a guy who knows the big band genre. Whereas I'm a rock and roll rhythm and blues guy. I know nothing about that music. So I'm just taking it in from a different angle. But Peter knows that entire history of music. And when it was over, he leaned over to me and he said, now you have to understand, he didn't mean this in any kind of negative way. All right, because this is all about love for Charlie. But I just want to tell you, since you want a story, Peter leaned over to me and he said, look, man, I don't know how to say this. He said, but I'm going to say it quietly. He says, I'm not sure if I get this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I understand. And by the way, Peter inevitably is going to hear this. So I got to make sure I cover all my bases here to make sure that no one sees Peter
Threw him under the
Erskine.
bus, and the bus already ran him over.
Sorry.
So let me just say, I said to Peter, listen, man, I understand what you are experiencing. I said, here's how you need to take this in. This is about honesty. That's what Charlie's about. And you can say that about any player, whether they're a minimalist or whether they play a million notes every bar. You can give everybody that sort of label and go, hey, that's what the cat feels. It's honesty. And you have to understand that this is who Charlie is, Peter. You know, and if you check the Rolling Stones out, you'll see what I mean. But it's simply about honesty. And that's how Charlie feels this music and wishes to honor it. And there's no fireworks, so get over it.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure nobody here sees Peter in a bad light for saying he didn't
No.
quite get it.
No, not at all.
I
course not.
understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yep.
But I just said, well, I told him what I said. But anyhow, I remember that very distinctly because, yeah, it is what it is.
You know, I suppose a way to look at it is that Charlie had such a love for this music and an admiration and respect for the players that he wanted to put himself in that environment. You know, it's
Totally.
it's like walking in a room of all your heroes, and you just, you know, you're sitting in the driver's seat, but you don't have anything to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And listen, I didn't, there's something I should add. That all night for the whole hour, the music felt great. I didn't include that.
Yeah.
It all was swinging. And I'm not, you know, familiar with that genre. I didn't tune in until like Chuck Berry, so I know nothing about that music, but it felt really good. It was grooving. And I mean, that's something in itself. He made it all feel good. I just want to add it that
Yeah.
though it may
Yeah.
be unsensational in terms of fireworks, it was sensational in terms of groove. And, you know, that's what he does for the Rolling Stones.
Yeah,
Even though
true.
the shit can be slightly all over the place at times, the Stones always feels good. It doesn't matter if it's metronomic, and I know I've banged on for, you know, many years about getting your shit together and playing in time and click tracks, and, you know, you got to learn to get that stuff together. But I mean, the bottom line is, contrary to everything I've said in the past, you know, music can feel good no matter what.
Yeah.
And the Stones were like, you know, they were all over the place a lot of the time, but it always felt good. You could tap your foot to it and dance to it. You know what they meant, you know, and that's what Charlie brought to it. I mean, at least in spite of all sometimes being all over the place, Charlie held it together, and he did the same thing with the big band. He provided a groove
He did.
and let the horn section just do their shit.
Yeah.
Steve, did
not
you
about
ever
him.
hear that band, Steve Gadd? Did you hear that?
The
Did you hear?
Stones?
Yeah, Charlie with the big band.
Yeah.
No,
it was a
no, I
Tentet,
didn't.
I think it was.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. No.
Yeah. I had seen them in 2001, the same band at the Blue Note in New York. I believe it was the same band we saw Andy in 2004. So I was maybe less surprised, I guess, when we saw him at Ronnie's, because I had that sort of eye-opening the first time I saw him in 2001, where Charlie just played time all night. And my takeaway from that was that he really didn't want to make this about him at all. He didn't, you know, people were coming to see him. Obviously, he was the draw to get people to come see the band for the most part, but and you're right. No, in terms of fireworks, it wasn't about that. And he just really wanted to stay out of the way. And I think in my mind, once I got past that and, you know, sort of mentally, I really dug it because like you said, it really grooved. It swung. The rest of the guys in the band were great, played great. And it was really musical. It didn't need him, you know, throwing shit down to make it better, you know?
Yeah, I mean, big band drumming became an art form. And we know, like, there's a lot of guys like mentioned today, Buddy Rich, Louis Belson, Cozy Cole. They were like really exciting, like goosebumps, big band drummers. So there is that side of it where big band drumming can be incredibly exciting. And most cats that play in a big band will tell you if the drummer ain't happening, the whole thing is not happening. But Charlie came at it from a different point of view. There were not, you know, he just played the time like that's what he does. I mean, that's what Charlie does. There was no attempt at any kind of big band vocabulary at all. He grooved through the whole thing.
You know, one of his heroes was Davy Tough.
Davy
in that
Tough, I was
regard.
thinking that,
Davy Tough was just a straight ahead timekeeping guy who couldn't do a double stroke press roll. It saved his life, but he locked it in. It's that, you know, it's that kind of thing, the Davy Tough thing, and also a little bit maybe of the Mel Lewis side, and guys like Don Lemond, you know, who Buddy Rich said Don Lemond's the greatest big band drummer in the world. That was Buddy who said that, because there's that side of it, you know, where you locked it in and it swings like a son of a bitch, and you don't need to do the pyrotechnics, you know?
I read a biography on Don Lemond. I never even knew about the guy, and then checked out some recordings. And let me tell you, he could deliver the fireworks as well.
If he needed to. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this other guy somebody mentioned earlier, Stan Levy, never heard of the cat in my life, but I got a book about Stan Levy that somebody sent me a few months ago. That was an education, that was. I mean, he was deep into it right back when all the bebop stuff was
Charlie
happening.
Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, man, he was in their band and he kicked serious ass. And what a technician too, man. Stan was a killer.
And you
Southpaw,
know,
too.
Stan Levy was a boxer, a
Yes.
semi-professional boxer.
Yes.
Wow.
Anyhow, they had a photograph of him and Charlie in the back of the book. I mean, this was all new to me. I never had heard of Stan Levy, so it was all fascinating. But somebody mentioned him earlier.
Cool.
But wow, he was a part of some very happening stuff. But yet, Charlie dug deep into all these cats.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear from Stan and Rick on like some memorable Charlie recordings or songs that maybe even influenced you.
I think Stan wants to say, I see Stan has been trying to get a word in for the last 15 minutes, but
I was just going to respond to my impression of watching Charlie and listening that he seemed like the ultimate conversationalist in a band, and being in a band is so different than just being a drummer. It requires, it's a magical moment. Like, you know, the Stones without Charlie, it's dead meat. It's like Zepp without Bonzo, or like the Faces without Kenney, or et cetera, et cetera. It's that wonderful intangible thing where usually it requires the drummer, you know, that old story about he's got two ears and he's going to listen twice as hard with, you know, he's got one mouth, two ears. Listen more than you talk. And Charlie's the full embodiment of that to me. Coming up, when you're coming up listening, you think, oh, I got to learn to be Flash. I'm going to show my ass. I'm going to be the man. Then you see a guy like Charlie walk out and you realize he's responding. He's listening intently, and then he's going to react if needed. Or maybe he parries by non-reaction. Maybe he's the ultimate swordsman. He's like, hey, knock yourselves out. And and I love watching him do that. Like watching his band, he would watch them so carefully, but yet not like uptight about it. He was just, I'll let you guys do your thing. But it was magical, the records that he made. And when I started to really listen, like Andy was saying about that volume thing, like you hear a song like even Ruby Tuesday, or She's a Rainbow, or one of those, they're sort of like odder songs. And you realize that the massive, it sounds like he's coming at you with baseball bats, but then you realize it's that beautiful technique. He's pulling the sound out. He's reaching in and bringing it out. Like he's not dead sticking anything. And it's just gorgeous to watch that relaxed power and dignity. And it was fabulous just to see he was the right guy in that band. And you know, I know Steve Jordan is a monster. It's going to always kill me to see someone in that chair. It's going to hurt. It probably hurts Steve Jordan too. I know it does.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it hurts like hell. You know, just the thought, like, you know, not seeing that beautiful kid, not seeing that cool dude.
I know. Let me ask you something. Stan, well, anybody who cares to comment, I have a question. Do you think that it's wrong, or somehow does it disagree with you that Led Zeppelin never went out again without John Bonham, but the fact that the Who went out without Keith, and the Stones are going without Charlie, and I can't think of any other examples, but does that bug you? Does that bug any of you?
I can weigh in. I can see, like, I can see it at both sides now. As a young buck, I'd go like, you know, man, you got to hang it up, man. You can't do that, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But as I've gotten older, my rule book is becoming more blended. And I can see that, like, everybody's got to be somewhere, man. And it's as long as you can do it. And I know in this situation with the Stones, if there was ever a reverent motherfucker, that's going to be Steve Jordan. He's going to honor those charts. I swear to God, he's going to know those songs, the records, better than the band will. Yeah. And they're probably going to have to stress him to make him realize, like, no, man, that was 30 years ago. We did that. Because he's going to be so honorable. And, you know, but
I agree.
It's tough. I mean, part of me, like when Moon died, I was like outraged. But then when I saw it, was like, well, it's Kenney Jones. Well, shit.
Mhm.
Let me
that's
tell you,
pretty
let me
cool.
weigh in a minute about the
Sorry,
Steve
go ahead.
Jordan thing, if I can.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important. I think, what everybody's saying here is right. I think if the band wants to go with Charlie's blessing, no less, because that was discussed in advance. And Steve called me before and this was announced, and he said, "Hey man, I need your help because I need something." And he needed some drums, and he told me what was going to be happening. He was going to be on the tour, and we were talking about what he wanted, and he said, "What I really want," and we arranged for all of this for him, equipment wise. He said, "I just really want to make sure that I do justice to the sound of each of the songs, the eras, etc. Everything, I want to do justice to it." We talked about a bunch of different types of kits that he might use. We ended up getting a 10-piece Gretsch kit. He finally nailed it down. He said, the 13 and the 14 floor and the 24 bass drum are the ones that are doing it. He's got a wood snare drum that we got him. He said, it's a separate issue. It's a Craviotto wood snare he's playing. But he said, for certain tunes, I need a metal drum he's playing. And he's really dialing it into, what am I here for? I am here to best represent the band and the music, and it's not about him. So I do believe it was the best possible choice. And he already has the vibe going because of all the work he's done with Keith. So that's helpful too. But I do think he's the perfect choice. Nothing replaces, no, it's not a replacement. It's just, it's not a replacement, but it's the best choice to let them continue. That's what I think.
Yeah.
He was the only choice.
Well,
He
I
was the only choice.
Yeah,
you're right,
I don't think Keith would have anybody else.
No.
Donnie D's got his hands up. He's going, what about him?
The thing is with Jordan, I did a Clapton tour with Steve, and I watched one tour where he had all the snare changes, had a cocktail kit coming out, the whole thing. But he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of how they record, what they do, and he's a huge music fan. His knowledge is unbeatable, and he does. When we did the tour, I had 12 snare changes, and every snare was tuned for a reason. Right. Whether it's old blues, and he'd make the snare sound like it came from the 30s and 40s, and some were covered in gaffer. You couldn't see any head; it was just all gaffer, but everything sounded right. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't play at it. He really studies what he's going to do, and he pays homage to everybody. And the thing with Charlie is that Charlie, loves Steve's playing and stuff, and he's the right man.
Yes.
Have there been any reviews? Any comment? I mean, I haven't heard anything.
Well, there's a lot of people saying there are a lot of people saying they shouldn't do it, and then there's a lot of people saying he's doing a great job.
There was, if you want to call it a bad review, and it really isn't a bad review, they did a private show a few weeks ago here in Boston for the owner of the New England Patriots football team. And some video about a minute or two of satisfaction leaked out into the world. And people immediately said, "Oh, it's not Charlie." I mean, it was their first gig. It was in a tent.
Oh man.
Yeah. And
for 25 million pounds.
Yeah, probably. And but since
after
that,
tax.
After tax. Yeah, exactly. Net. But everything I've heard since that time, Andy has been all positive. Everybody that has been to the actual show has said he's really paying homage to Charlie. I mean, like the parts are, he's not playing it note for note, but he's got Charlie's vibe as much as anyone could have.
I can't imagine it doesn't sound great.
Oh
yeah.
It's going to be better too.
And they have to do it if they want to do it because of all those songs, Yeah. I mean, that's what people. I felt the same way. Well, I had this thing when Steely Dan went back out without Steve Gadd. It was kind of like, really,
Well,
Steve
the flip side of the coin is when you say should these bands do it or not, is that if you look at it from the surviving members' point of view, whether it's Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, or whether it's Mick and Keith, or whoever, they've spent their life building up a band. And so just because one of them dies, these guys can't be expected to give up what they've spent their life building. So I understand, like, the surviving members think, well, listen, this is our life. We built this from nothing since we were teenagers. We got to keep going. I get both sides of it.
It's phenomenal that they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, right.
It is.
Seriously. Yeah.
Come on.
You know,
I mean, come on.
It's the
And
same
then-
with the Who. You know,
Yeah.
I joined the Who with Zach when he got the gig in '95, and he's made it his gig.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
He
and-
sounds great too.
He's great in that shit.
and Zach learned from records, you know. So everyone, there's these stories that Keith Moon taught him to play. He didn't. You know, he did the same as I did. You just learned from playing from your favorite records.
Yeah.
And when you see him play, you just forget about the past. Zach has made it his own gig.
Yeah, that's nice.
Pete,
That's
Pete
nice.
told him. Pete said,
Yeah.
you know, you do what you need to do. He didn't want a replica of Moon.
Is
And-
he still got that gig?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I saw them
Pino.
last time they were in town. It sounded great.
Pino left.
Pino left, yeah.
Oh, he did. I didn't realize. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
No,
No, Simon's son plays guitar, right?
but it's Simon's son Ben
Yeah,
is going out with Roger as the drummer,
yeah,
and so the bass player got replaced because after I finished, my son took over for, well, you know that, John. My son took over for 10 years, and it you know, it's the only band that's ever made me nervous. You know, before the gigs start, we do the sound checks and everything, and then it's not until Zach used to jump on the kit and whack around the drums and then look over to me and give me a thumbs up, or maybe a thumbs down.
So listen,
I knew what sort of night I was in for.
we cut off Ricky and Steve. John, you said you wanted to get Ricky
I'd
and
love to
Steve
hear-
in, and we
I'd
keep
love to hear
cutting them off. So
Rick's
Do
a song that Rick likes besides Tumbling Dice. Rick, what's a we know why you like Tumbling Dice, but
No, I unfortunately have to leave soon, but I did want to say a couple of things. I didn't really know Charlie. I didn't get to meet him. I was at that Steel Wheels gig, that tour gig in LA, and you know, they said, "Do you want to go backstage?" and all of that stuff. And I was on my way back. That's not my scene. I probably saw Stan Lynch back there, and I thought, I just don't want to talk to anybody. I don't need to hang out with Stan. But I did see him play there. But my I guess anybody that played in any of the bands like Andrew and I did when we were younger played those early Stones songs like we did with Giant and those things. They all played like Satisfaction and Brown Sugar and all that kind of Honky Tonk Woman and all that stuff. And I always actually wondered, did he play on all of those things? Because there were always rumors tossed about, and I'm sure that he did. But when I had to cut, when we cut Tumbling Dice on Linda Ronstadt's album, Waddy was playing guitar, and Waddy had played with Charlie and played with the Stones. I remember listening and watching Charlie play, and more thinking I wanted to. So when I want to sound like somebody that plays simple, I like that, or anyway, I kind of like to watch them play. You know, you can see them and more emulate how they look, which was more what I actually was thinking of how Charlie looked when he played to cut that track. I've always loved that track for me. And I was sorry that I didn't get to hang out with him. I know that, John, you were setting up something where we were gonna maybe hang out one of these days. But another thing I wanted to say was listening to Steve and Yard about how generous. I've always heard unbelievably great things about him. You hear, oh, Charlie, I saw Charlie this. If you talk to John Christopher, that's all he talks about is Steve Gadd or Charlie. And everyone says the same thing. Just what a gentleman, what a nice man. And listening to Steve talk about how generous he was, how kind he was, and all the other things that he was. What I wanted to mention is, do you know who's not generous and not kind? And Steve Gadd. Why does anybody like Steve Gadd? I don't understand it. What is even on this thing?
I don't understand it either. I don't understand it either.
I've played with Steve. I've been friends with Steve for almost as long as I've been friends with Andrew Newmark. And, I've been on gigs where I said, Steve, you sound great. He goes, yeah, I know. I mean,
That sounds like him.
so it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing to hear. No, I'm serious about this. It's more, we all know what the Rolling Stones are and who they are. And Andy Newmark really said it. They're the sum of their parts is really what they are. They're better than they are individually. It's one of those bands where you put them together and they're just, it's unstoppable. It's unbeatable.
Yeah.
Even back when Bill Wyman was playing with them. I mean, now, and the other thing was when you were talking about Charlie leaving in the earlier conversation, I understand everything that everyone's saying about that, but I also felt like, well, Bill Wyman left and then Daryl Jones came in and played, and he sounds totally different, but he sounds really great.
Yeah.
And it's really great. I mean, when you look at the Stones, it looks like, honestly, it just looks like one less guy in the band. And Jordan, Gadd and I know Jordan from when he was just a kid. I mean, and we know how this guy plays. And I think you all said it. He's going to sound really great. And another thing I wanted to talk about was when Andy was talking about seeing the big band and how Charlie didn't play any fills or anything. Now, you guys who know me well know that was right up my alley. I loved hearing that. And I could hear Peter Erskine saying that, but I could also see John DeChristopher at the gig. John DeChristopher didn't hear a note of music. John DeChristopher only was drooling. He goes to those gigs to look at the vintage kits that Charlie's playing. None of that other shit mattered to him. He wouldn't care if he was just playing soloing all the way through or just playing ride cymbal and looking around having a cup of coffee. Like Steve likes to do that, have his coffee while he's playing ride at the same time. Steve Gadd, I'm talking about. Well, but I just wanted to address some of the earlier things I listened to in the conversation so that I had something to say about it. Charlie I'm so sorry that I didn't get to hang out with him and meet him. I think we would have gotten along really great because I'm pretty jaded and I'm pretty quiet and try to just make jokes a lot to make people laugh. But I think that, it just sounds like he was a great guy. And I'm sorry we're not going to hear him play with the Stones.
Yeah. Well said. Well
Beautiful,
said.
Rick. I was going to say, Rick, I'm pretty sure that the last time I saw him 2 years ago in July of 2019, I was on the Vineyard and I left for the day. And I think you might have gone to Ireland or maybe even Italy. You were out of town. I think you were originally going to be my date for the night. But
right. Yes.
So
I
that
was
would have been
looking
the
forward
time.
to that. I think I was leaving the country. Yes. On one of my many vacations.
Hey, Ricky.
Yeah.
Is that your house in the Vineyard?
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful.
First time I've seen it. I love that.
It's beautiful.
Listen, I'm gonna go, but I just wanted to say, I don't know how Ricky made me think of something, but when they announced that Charlie died, I really had this intense feeling of sadness.
Me too. Yeah.
And it lasted it lasted a good week or 10 days.
Mhm.
I couldn't shake it.
Mm.
It hit me on an emotional level, unlike the death. Well, I mean, on a level with the death of John Lennon.
Yeah,
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
that hit everybody, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Wow.
I
sure.
really, I was sad.
Yeah.
I
You know,
felt
I-
this-
Yeah,
I
it
feel
took
the same
time.
way.
It did not go away fast. It still hasn't sunken in
Yeah.
really.
You know, somebody said that to me. A friend of mine said, "You're really taking this hard. Did you know him?" And I said, I didn't. I knew of him. I know we knew each other. I would, he knew me as a not the great drummer from not the great
Just-
American drummer.
Just a
and-
drummer. That's all he said. He
But-
said you're
but-
just a drummer.
But no, I did have a friend said, "You're really taking this hard." I mean, were you friends? I said, "No, but I really am taking this hard. It's really, really hard." And then another friend of mine said, "It's all because we're all part of the same scene. We're not 80 yet, but look around. I mean, look at Gadd, for Christ's sake."
You think, Ricky, you
Before I
think
listen,
it's because you think it's because we kind of grew up with the Stones and the Beatles
course.
and all that?
Yeah.
oh yeah.
You think that has something
Yeah.
to do with it?
Yeah.
It really
That-
does.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And also, no one has ever said one bad thing about this guy. Like, I don't know. I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know if I'd feel the same way. I didn't feel the same way when Keith Moon died. I thought, yeah, that makes sense, because I had heard so many insane stories about this guy. It was like every day above ground for that guy was a bonus for him.
Bonus
because
day, right?
He was killing himself.
Yeah.
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 This was not a guy like that. It was just shocking.
I gotta say, I've had a strange reaction post Charlie. I've bought half a dozen ties.
Is that right? Seriously?
I swear to God, I have bought half a dozen ties, and I had a bespoke suit made. I mean,
Oh, that's
I never do that. I never do that. And now I'm kind of getting into it for some reason. You know how like Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, after Jerry Garcia died, he grew a beard. He kind of took on this thing. I don't know. I've bought a suit like having made and half a dozen ties, and I don't know what's going on. I kind of wanted to reach out, and maybe you guys could help me with that.
We'll see him
Hey,
on the
listen.
cover of GQ next month.
And
yeah. Yeah.
Cats, I'm gonna go. I
Okay,
love
Andy.
Me
seeing
too.
Me
those
too.
of you who I know, like Ricky, I love seeing your face. Michael,
Same here.
I love seeing you. I recognized you instantly.
Oh.
Steve, out in Arizona, I presume. I
Yeah.
love seeing your face.
Yeah,
And
well,
Yard, haven't seen you forever. I love
Yeah.
seeing you,
You too.
John. And yeah, it's great seeing all you guys, man.
Yeah,
But it's
likewise.
it's 8:30 here, and my dinner's. I got to eat dinner,
Gotta
Got
eat
it.
dinner. Okay. All right.
so I'm out of
Hi,
here.
Andy.
Hey, fellas.
All right, Andy.
See, Andy.
John, thank you for putting this together, John.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
Jeff.
Michael. Thank you,
Thanks, Jeff.
everybody. And Stanley, was there anything you wanted to say before we close it out? Was there any final words?
It's just such a pleasure to see all of you and to feel like I have some knowledge of you now. It's like you've all been in the ether in my life. Everyone here has been in the ether and has had some infection on me. And I've known everyone by reputation here on the screen. I've known everyone.
Yeah.
And I maybe have brushed into people, but it's a real treat for me as a man when
Yeah.
I turn the computer off, I'm going to have a sense of like, hey, I know these guys and they know me. That makes me feel really good.
I tell you,
Beautiful, Stan.
I've been doing this thing with some drummers ever since COVID started, with Lenny White and Mike Clark and Greg Arrico and David Garibaldi and myself. Three
Whoa.
times a week,
Hmm.
we would Zoom. And I recorded all of them 3 times a week for a year, like a men's group, and everybody really can't wait to get there. And so you can see why it is. It's nice to connect. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody here, call me anytime.
Stan,
Thing.
one word of advice.
Sure.
Try to keep Steve Gadd in the ether. You don't want to get him too close. Keep him Keep them in the ether.
Right. Listen, I just got to tell you one story before we go.
Okay.
This guy, he walks into a neighborhood bookstore, and there's a little girl behind the cash register, and he goes up to her. He says, "There's a new book out I'm looking for. It's written for men with small penises." And she thought for a minute and said, "I don't think it's in yet." He said, "Yeah, that's the one. How much is it?"
Hey, where's the rim shot?
Mic drop.
That's staying in too. So this is going to go to a podcast also. So for people who can't see, I want to thank Steve Gadd, Michael Shrieve, Stan Lynch, Rick Marotta, John Ferraro, Steve Maxwell, Yard Gavrilovic, and missing from the screen is Kenney Jones and Andy Newmark. But thank you all for doing this today. This has been a blast. I know we had a few little technical things that made it all the more fun, but this has been great. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John.
Thanks you all.
Guys.
Thank you for pulling it together, John.
Yeah.
So same time tomorrow, we'll do the same thing again, and this time with a little bit more spirit.
Thanks.
Anytime, John.
All right, you guys.
Bye,
Yeah,
guys.
Guys, thanks.
I love you guys. Love you all.
Got to.
See you soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.